The distress call was weak. It bled across the void like a fatting heartbeat, a flicker of desperation against the silence of space. The transmission crackled and broke, sometimes little more than static, sometimes a whisper carrying pain and terror. "This is Veen IV. We are under attack, our cities burn, our people fall, please help us." The voice belonged to a woman. She wasn't a soldier, not an officer. There was no measured calm or rehearsed protocol. Every word was torn raw from a throat that had screamed too long. Her voice cracked halfway through. You could hear explosions in the background, screams, the hollow thunder of buildings collapsing. Then silence. The message repeated once, weaker this time, before vanishing into static. For the galaxy, it was already over. The forgotten world. Veen IV was nothing more than a colony on the fringe of charted space. A human settlement carved into fertile valleys and wide rivers, where families grew grain and mined minerals to trade with passing merchants. It had no armies, no orbital platforms, no strategic metals, just people. Farmers, miners, teachers, children. And that was why the ARX Dominion came. The Dominion were a brutal race of conquerors, their fleets known across the spiral arms. They waged war not for resources, but for domination. They left broken worlds in their wake as warnings to others. Veen IV was perfect prey. It had no defenses, no value to the great powers of the galaxy, and most importantly, no allies willing to bleed for it. The ARX fleet descended in fire. Warships like floating fortresses filled the sky, their engines painting the night with scars of burning plasma. Bombardments lit the ground in waves of destruction. Cities crumbled beneath the rain of energy fire. Dominion soldiers in black alloy armor stormed through streets, their rifles spitting lines of white heat. Any who resisted were executed. The planet's name was being erased before anyone even spoke it aloud. The Council turns away. The Galactic Council received the transmission first. Their chambers were filled with the voices of dozens of species, their words polite but hollow. "The situation is regrettable," said Chancellor Valen of the Zephyr Union, his scaled hands folded neatly. "But we cannot risk destabilizing our relations with the Dominion over a backwater world." "Agreed," intoned Speaker Orvis of the Scieri Alliance. "If we intervene, we invite total war. That colony holds no resources vital to the balance of power." "Collateral casualties are tragic," muttered another delegate, "but acceptable." So they shook their heads. They invoked the non-interference treaty. They looked at charts and numbers and declared that nothing must be done. The galaxy turned its back. Earth hears the call, but humanity heard it. On Earth, in the underground halls of the United Terran Command, the message played across every display. Officers stood frozen, listening to the broken voice plead for help as fire consumed her world. At the center of the command chamber, Admiral Elias Vance listened without moving. His face was carved with the hard lines of old battles. His uniform, dark navy with silver trim, hung on his broad shoulders like armor. His gray eyes were steady as stone. When the message ended, silence filled the chamber. "Status," Vance said. Captain Lee Monroe, his second-in-command, glanced at her console. Her short, dark hair fell loose across her forehead as her fingers danced across glowing keys. "Confirmed ARX fleet in orbit, sir. Estimated 30 capital ships plus escorts. Orbital strikes already underway. Colonial death toll catastrophic." She hesitated, lowering her voice. "Over 100,000 gone in the first wave." "And the Council?" Vance asked, though he already knew. Monroe's jaw tightened. "They've refused to act. They won't risk confrontation with the Dominion." Around the chamber, officers shifted uncomfortably. Some bowed their heads, some clenched their fists, others whispered curses under their breath. Vance didn't move. He studied the holographic projection of Veen IV, its continents glowing red as bombardments scarred its surface. Finally he spoke. His voice was quiet, steady, absolute. "Prepare the fleet." Monroe blinked. "Sir." "You heard me, Captain. Ready all ships. We depart within the hour." She hesitated. "Admiral, if we do this, we defy the Council. We could trigger sanctions, isolation even." "The Council abandoned them," Vance snapped, his voice cutting the silence like a blade. He straightened, his gaze burning with cold fire. "But they are still our people. Humanity does not abandon its own, not ever." Monroe swallowed, then gave a sharp nod. "Aye, sir." The chamber erupted into motion. Officers shouted orders, tactical maps shifted, engines roared to life across the Sol system. The Secret Fleet. For years, the galaxy had believed humanity fractured and weak, a species too new to the stars, too busy arguing among themselves to stand united. The Council thought Earth could never muster more than a handful of defense ships. They were wrong. In secret beneath the icy crust of Titan, inside the shipyards of Mars, buried deep in Earth's oceans, humanity had been building, preparing. 500 warships, dreadnoughts bristling with rail cannons capable of piercing capital armor, cruisers fitted with plasma lances that burned hotter than stars, swarms of corvettes sleek and fast as daggers, carriers whose bays held wings of starfighters waiting to scream into the void. It was a force that should not exist, a storm hidden beneath the surface of history, forged by a species that had never stopped preparing for war. And at its heart, the flagship, indomitable. The dreadnought stretched for kilometers, its wedge-shaped hull a fortress of steel and fire. Entire cities could have fit inside its decks. Its engines glowed like miniature suns. Its guns, rail cannons, missile silos, energy lances, bristled along its frame like the teeth of some ancient leviathan. On its bridge, Admiral Vance stood with hands clasped behind his back. The ship vibrated faintly beneath his boots as reactors roared awake. "Fleet ready, Admiral," Monroe reported. Her voice was steady now, her earlier hesitation gone. There was no turning back. Vance nodded once, set course for Veen IV. "Course locked." "Full formation," he said, "and tell the fleet." He looked up at the viewport, at the darkness beyond, at the faint stars scattered across eternity. Somewhere out there, a world was burning, and its people thought no one would come. "Tell them humanity answers the call." The words echoed through every ship, carried on every comm channel, whispered across the steel hearts of men and women who had waited their whole lives for this moment. Engines flared. The armada surged forward. In the darkness of the void, humanity came with fire. And for the first time in centuries, the ARX Dominion would learn what it meant to bleed. The armada arrived like sunrise. 500 human warships fell out of faster-than-light in a diamond wall, their engines burning white, their hulls catching the light of Veen IV's twin moons. At the point of the formation, the dreadnought Indomitable cut space like a blade. Targeting grids bloomed. Rail cannons spun up with a low thunder that the crew felt in their bones. On the bridge, Admiral Elias Vance stood with his hands behind his back and his eyes on the tactical sphere. Red icons, ARX Dominion ships, curled around the planet like a clenched fist. Blue icons, humanity, opened like a hand. "Mark their firing arcs," Vance said. "Arcs plotted," Captain Lee Monroe answered. "They're using ground cover bombing patterns. If we hit them where they sit, debris will fall into the cities." "Then we drag them away." Vance's voice stayed calm. "Grapple nets pin them high." A chorus of acknowledgments rolled across the bridge. Humanity had learned to fight in crowded orbits. They had built tools for it. Grav lancers, slab-like projectors that threw invisible hooks of gravity, bit into enemy hulls and yanked them up, away from atmosphere, away from the burning cities. Kite mines bloomed in the higher lanes, unfurling thin shimmering sheets that snagged engines without ripping ships apart. Every weapon was brutal but precise. Every volley was shaped to pull the fight off the colony. "Fleet," Vance said, his voice carrying across thousands of decks. "The Dominion made the ground our enemy. We make the sky theirs, fire at will." The void turned to fire. Indomitable's rail cannons kicked, 3 long pulses that hurled slugs the size of houses. Slugs crossed space in heartbeats and punched through an ARX capital ship's shields with a peal of blue light. Armor split like fruit. The warship staggered, dragged upward by gravity nets, falling away from the planet as its spine snapped. Human cruisers slid in pairs, trading fire with Dominion escorts. Swarms of starfighters spilled out of carriers and wrote white lines across the night. Missile screens bloomed like constellations being born. Where the ARX tried to dive, human corvettes knifed underneath, chewing at engines, lashing them up toward the mines. On the surface, people looked up and saw the sky split into streaks. The city of Glassgrass. In the valley city of Marish Vale, the streets were wet with chemical rain. Buildings wore smoke like old coats. The wind pushed waves through the fields of glassgrass, tall, translucent blades that sang when they touched. Their song had always been a soft trill on summer nights. Now it was a thin, shaking note in a world turned violent. Ryan Cade tasted ash and metal and fear. He was an engineer by trade, a fixer of broken harvesters and worn-out pumps. He kept his tools in a dented gray case that he never left behind. He had lived on Veen IV for 6 years because he'd run out of places to run. Smuggling fines, bad debts, one fight too many on the wrong station bar. The colony had offered amnesty if you were willing to work. He had worked. He had learned the valley's machinery, the wind towers that hummed with captured breeze, the river intakes that drank the snowmelt, the little school's boxy 3D printer that liked to seize on Layer 7. He had friends. He had a tiny apartment over Elder Brock's tea stall. He had a neighbor who had taught him how to listen to the glassgrass when storms were coming. His neighbor was not human. Sira of the Ilari stood beside him now, slender and long-limbed, her skin a pale pearlescent blue that caught the fires above like water catching moonlight. Delicate fins, sails, she called them, ran from her wrists to her hips and along her spine. They flexed when she breathed. Her eyes had no whites, only deep silver irises in pools of black. She wore a thin cloak woven with tiny metal threads that chimed with every step. Among her people, the chime was a greeting. Today it sounded like a nervous heartbeat. "They are pulling the ships away," she said, watching the sky. Her voice was low, musical. "Whoever came knows how to fight without crushing those below." "Humans," Ryan said, equal parts pride and disbelief. "It has to be." "Your people came," Sira's eyes softened. "Then hope came with them." A blast hammered the street. The far wall of the school cracked like dry wood. People around them ducked instinctively. Ryan's case fell open and tools scattered. He stuffed wrenches back with shaking hands. "Shelter's full," he said. "The lower one flooded last month." Sira nodded. "The river eats its banks. We warned the council. They called it unlucky floodplain." "Yeah," Ryan said. "They do that." He pointed at a low cargo hopper half buried under a blown-out awning. "If I can get that running, we can carry 20 at a time down to the river quarries. The caverns there will hold until this ends." Sira grabbed the corner of the awning and lifted. Ryan slid under the hopper's nose. It had taken shrapnel in the radiator. He pulled wire, stripped insulation with his teeth, bridged 2 lines with a carbon spanner and a prayer. "Try it," he called. Sira touched the start pad. The hopper coughed, juddered, and then the lift fans spun up with a whining buzz. The machine rose 2 centimeters and held. "Good girl," Ryan said to the hopper and slapped her side. "Let's move." Neighbors poured aboard, an old Ilari musician with his broken flute, a human mother with 2 dusty-faced kids, a Zephyr woman with scaled fingers bright with blood who refused to leave until Ryan nodded to the tool case, and she shoved it into his lap. Sira stood by the hatch and counted with calm hands and quick eyes. Over the buildings, something heavy moved. They looked up and saw an ARX purifier, a squat, 6-legged walker the size of a bus, climb over the rubble like a predatory beetle. Its central gun swept left and right, seeking targets. It sprayed the street with white flame that left black scars on stone. "Sira," Ryan started. "Down," she hissed, and dragged him flat behind the hopper's skirting. The walker's gun passed over them. Ryan heard his own breath louder than the world. The hopper's lift fans wobbled under his shoulder. If the purifier saw power heat, it would burn them all. Something streaked across the sky. A dark capsule with orange fire licking its skin. The capsule slammed into the street with a punch of air. Its hull blew outward like a metal flower. A human soldier stepped out in a heavy exoframe, matte armor, shoulders broad, helmet smooth and featureless except for a thin visor strip. "Terra Corps," the patch said. A squad poured out behind her, rifles up. The lead trooper pointed her weapon at the walker and fired. Blue-white pulses hammered leg joints. The purifier turned, screamed with some machine voice, and spat white fire back. The troopers flowed apart smooth as water, seeking low ground. 2 knelt, 2 leapfrogged. A grenade arced, stuck, and flashed. The walker's knee detonated. It toppled with a crash that made the glassgrass sing in a broken chord. The trooper's visor turned toward the hopper. "Civilians," the helmet speaker translated. "Yeah," Ryan said, rising, hands up. "We're moving people to the quarries." "Good plan, this zone is hot." Her helmet moved minutely, listening to something only she could hear. "More walkers inbound, we'll cover you, go." Ryan nodded. Sira started the hopper again. The lift fans bit air. The vehicle creaked forward over shattered pavement. The squad leader jogged alongside for 3 steps, then paused and pressed something into Ryan's hand, a thin metallic band. "Translator cuff," she said. "We'll talk Elari, we'll listen too." Then she turned and ran toward the next corner, where another walker's shadow had appeared. Ryan looked at the cuff, then at Sierra. He snapped it around his wrist. A cool electric tingle slid into his skin. When Sierra spoke, "We should keep to the alleys," he heard her in clear human words, and at the same instant felt the soft vowels of her own tongue lift at the edge of his ear. "Thank you," he said, "for staying." "I promised Elder Brock I would watch the tea stall," Sierra said, almost smiling. "The stall is ash now, the promise remains." They turned the corner and nearly drove into a wall of Dominion soldiers. Black alloy armor, lenses like insect eyes, rifles humming. Sierra braked so hard the hopper skidded. Ryan's stomach flipped. The soldiers lifted rifles as one. A streak of gray slammed into the lead ARX, one of the human troopers, her jump packs flaring. She hit like a thrown engine. The ARX line crumpled. The street filled with plasma and screaming and smoke and the thud of bodies. The hopper slid through during the chaos like a beetle under a boot heel and did not die by luck or by grace. At the end of the street, they burst into the river plaza, the wide, flat square where farmers came to trade and kids came to swim. The giant wind towers that fed the pumps stood like white trees around the plaza's edge, their vanes still spinning though the wind carried soot. The river below ran fast and cold. The quarries cut into the far bank. The caverns beyond were black mouths with dust halos. "Unload," Ryan shouted. Sierra ushered people out with calm touches and quick words. He ran to the pump control box. Dominion rounds had cut its conduit. He clamped his teeth on a strip of copper, bridged burned contacts with his spanner, and told the old machine to live. The pump coughed. Power surged through the stone. Lamps along the quarry path flickered to life, painting the dark with dirty gold. Scared faces turned toward the light like flowers. "You did it," Sierra said softly. "Not yet, I—" A child tugged Ryan's sleeve. Human, hair matted with ash, eyes too big for his face. He held out something wrapped in torn fabric. Ryan unwrapped it and found a little Elari sail pin, hammered from river tin and etched with swirls. "For the T-man," the boy said. "He gave it to me, he said it's for luck." Ryan swallowed. "I'll keep it safe." Above them, the fight in the sky shifted. The red icons on the tactical sphere above Veen IV began to thin. Fire and precision. On Indomitable's bridge, Monroe's fingers ran quick across her console. "We have them off the ground. Confirmed. 90% of enemy heavy ships are above safe detonation altitude. We can cut loose." "Do it," Vance said. The dreadnought's spinal rail cannon thumped twice. Slugs drove through an ARX warbarge and continued, still supersonic, to spear another behind it. Indomitable rolled, presenting fresh batteries. Blue lances, the ship's plasma beams, carved clean lines across the dark. Where they touched, Dominion hulls bloomed white and then went black, spinning. Across the fleet, captains called ranges. Gunnery chiefs murmured wind-calm prayers born from old sea navies. Corvettes dove and rose like hunting swallows. Human pilots shouted to one another in clipped, fast language, the talk of people who had practiced 1,000 times for this exact day. The Dominion did not break easily. Their capital ships tried to tear into a defense stack. Their escorts bled in bunches, but they bit back. For a minute that stretched forever, a ring of ARX vessels managed to rake Indomitable's port side with crossfire. Vance set his boots wider. "Hold steady," he said, as if the ship could hear him. "Return weight on my mark." Monroe's voice cut the noise. "Secondary reactor at 71%. Turret temperatures rising. We can keep this pace for 12 minutes. "We'll need 6, Vance lifted his hand. "Mark." Indomitable fired again. The massive rail slugs went out in a slow, implacable rhythm. 1-2, 1-2. With each hit, the ring lost a section. With each loss, their fire grew ragged. The human fleet pushed. The ARX line bent. "Admiral," a comms officer called, "we're receiving a groundside burst on emergency code. Origin, Marish Vale. Packet piggybacked through a TerraCore squad net. It's flagged critical." "Put it on." The display rippled. A little camera with dust on its lens showed a man with soot on his face and a strip of copper wire clenched in his teeth like a pirate's knife. A pale blue alien stood at his shoulder, eyes like pools of mercury. Who am I speaking to? The man shouted over a wind that wasn't wind, more a deep vibration gnawing the air. This is Ryan Cade, engineer. I'm with Sierra of the Elari. We found Dominion equipment in the pump caverns, big black pillars dropping into the rock. They're wired into the wind tower grid. There. The screen shook. Dust fell in thick curtains. Distant stone groaned like an old ship. They're drilling, Ryan yelled. Not for water, for the mantle. They called it the black spine in their schematics. If I'm reading this right, get back, Sierra, it's hot. If I'm reading this right, they plan to crack the crust. They lose the planet, they take it with them. A cold stillness moved through the bridge, through the whole ship, as if every deck held its breath at once. Time, Vance asked softly. Ryan looked over his shoulder. Sierra lifted a slate, Dominion letters scrolling like razors. The translator cuff rewrote them into simple text. Sierra's voice was steady but quiet. 10 minutes, she said. 9 now. Monroe's eyes flashed. Admiral, if they crack the mantle under a city, the shock will tear every valley on the continent. If the spike couples with river channels, steam bursts could erase half the basin. We'll lose tens of thousands, maybe more. Can you disable it from orbit? Vance asked. Not without hitting the towers powering the grid, Monroe said. If we cut power hard, the failsafe looks like it dumps stored energy into the spike to complete the strike. If we shoot the spike, we risk detonating it. It has a capacitive cage. Very primitive idea, very ugly. Ryan's voice came again, lighter now, forced into calm by the shape of the disaster. I can reroute the grid. The old river pumps were built to dump stress into the water. If we flip the phase, we can bleed the spike down into the quarry lines and back out into the river. It'll blow the banks. It won't blow the world. How? Vance asked. I need power, Ryan said. Clean, steady, hard, and I need the towers to hold for 7 minutes while I cheat the grounding logic. Sierra can talk to the Dominion logic caps. She speaks faster than their machines. But if a walker hits us or if one tower drops, the bleed will fail and the spike will do what it wants to do. Sierra looked up into the camera. Her silver eyes did not waver. We will do it. You must keep the sky closed. Vance looked at Monroe. She did not need to speak. The sky had to be held whatever the cost. Ryan Cade, Vance said, you have your power. This is Admiral Elias Vance of the United Terran Fleet. We stand over you. We will not let the towers fall. Ryan swallowed. He nodded once like a man taking a burden and planting his feet under it. Then let's cut a monster's spine. The comm flicked out. Monroe was already moving. Signal all ships over Marish Vale. Shift fire lanes, corvettes low-orbit picket. Nothing touches those towers. All gun platforms set to anti-drop. Fighters, mosquito pattern, stingers for anything that moves within 5 clicks of the grid. Admiral, another officer said, Dominion flagship is vectoring for a break. They're trying to punch past us on the far side. They'll aim to hit the towers, Vance said, too quietly for anyone to doubt. Run them down. The fleet heeled and went. The black spine. In the pump caverns, heat shimmered off rock. The black spine looked like a pillar of night driven through the earth, its surface engraved with pulsing threads. You could feel it humming in your teeth. It went down, and your eyes wanted to follow it because your mind thought the whole should end, but it did not. Ryan's hands shook until he put them on a panel. Touch made everything smaller. Wires, screws, sequences. He knew how to be a mechanic. He didn't know how to save a world. He would try anyway. Sierra crouched beside the Dominion logic core. Her fingers moved with quick, precise grace. The translator cuff at Ryan's wrist hummed softly as it bridged between her language and the machine's blunt command set. Guard cycle is primitive, she said. Ugly, as the captain said, it expects to die at the end. We must convince it that it already has, that it has succeeded too well and bleeds itself gently. She glanced up and a small smile touched the corner of her mouth. Lies are sometimes mercy. Teach me your lies, Ryan said, and grinned because his choices were grin or scream. He flipped open a pump relay box and plunged his hands into a nest of cables. He rerouted the tower feeds. He bridged the river intakes into a single giant throat. He felt his way along power like a blind man finding the shape of a room. The resistor stacks groaned. The big flywheels deep in the quarry hummed as they spun up, drinking momentum from generators that had never in all their years felt this kind of load. A Dominion technician stumbled out of a side tunnel, thin, chitin-plated eyes burning with black fire. He raised a needle rifle. Sierra moved without looking. The cloak chimes sang as she turned. Her hand flashed. The rifle hit the stone and skittered away. She stepped in, whispered a word Ryan's cuff did not translate, and the technician folded as if a string had been cut. "Thank you," Ryan said, breathless. Later, Sira said, "Work." He worked. He felt the spikes hunger through the cables, felt it draw. The towers above groaned. The wind that spun their big white veins was heavy with smoke, but it still spun, and it still turned generators, and the generators sent power down, and the spike drank it like a god. Ryan flipped the bleed. At first nothing happened. Then a deep tremor rolled through the rock. Water surged the wrong way in the river channels, backing up like an angry animal. The bleed path took. The spike's draw met the river's pull and got confused. The Dominion failsafe logic clicked to life. "It is thinking," Sira whispered. "We must make it think quicker." "I can give it more to think about." Ryan slammed a wrench handle against an old switch and jammed it closed. The flywheels took another belt of momentum. The spike drank harder. The river roared. 5 minutes, Sira said. 4. Ryan wiped sweat and soot on his sleeve and looked up at the ceiling as dust fell in soft sheets. Somewhere above them, the towers moaned. Somewhere above them, people watched the sky and chose not to run because someone had told them to hold and they believed. "Hold for me," he whispered, to towers and ships and strangers and friends. The cavern lights flickered. The spike's song changed. It went from a hungry hum to a higher-pitched whine like a kettle about to scream. Sira glanced at the slate. The Dominion characters crawled faster, then slower, then faster again. "It is shedding," she said. "It believes it has released enough to cause damage. It wishes to gloat before it dies." She tilted her head, listening to something that was not sound. "We must let it gloat long enough to starve." "How long?" Her eyes met his. 2 minutes, perhaps 3. 2 minutes, Ryan said. "I can do 2. He could if the towers lived. The towers. In the river plaza, human troopers spread in a defensive fan around the tower bases. Their exoframes took hits that would have pulped a man and kept moving. Walkers crashed against them and fell in pieces. Corvettes roared so low their exhaust washed the plaza in heat, then clawed back into the sky to snap missiles out of the air. On the second tower, the old Ilari musician wrapped his arms around a structural brace, as if holding it tighter would keep it upright. He put his broken flute between his lips and pushed out a note so thin it was almost not there. Others joined him, humans humming rough, Ilari making that water-bright tone. The glassgrass along the river carried the sound like a wire. Above them, the Dominion flagship lunged for a break. Indomitable turned and blocked. "Bring us nose to nose," Vance said. Monroe's mouth twitched. "Aye." The 2 huge ships crossed at knife range, whole decks raked open and spilling light. Indomitable's forward batteries fired point-blank. A rail slug entered the Dominion flagship dead center and left somewhere it had never planned to have a hole. The flagship shuddered, listed, and began to tumble with ugly grace. On the bridge, Vance exhaled once. "No one touches those towers," he said again, softly like a prayer. "Admiral," a sensor tech whispered, "ground signal rising. The spike's primary band is dropping." Monroe's hands clenched on the console rim. "Come on," she breathed. "Come on, you stubborn thing." 1 minute. The caverns shook, stone popped and flaked. The black spine's whine skated up into a frequency that stabbed behind the eyes. Ryan grit his teeth. He could feel his molars buzz. "Power is dropping," Sira said, very slowly. "Can you cheat it faster?" "I can lie louder." Her fingers flew. She sang softly in her own language. The translator cuff did not touch the song. Ryan felt the hairs on his arms rise. The spike's threads flickered in new patterns, little pauses where there had been none, tiny surrenders. 30 seconds, Sira said. In the plaza, a walker dragged itself forward on 2 legs, trailing sparks. It lifted its gun to cut the tower base, and a human trooper stepped into its light and let it fire. Armor blackened. The trooper bent, grabbed the walker's gun barrel, and used it to lever the whole machine over the edge into the river. Steam blew up in a scalding curtain. The trooper fell to her knees and then stood again. On the bridge, Vance closed his eyes for a heartbeat and opened them. "Status," he said, and did not ask if they could do it. He asked how they would succeed. "Spike bleed at 80%, Monroe said. 90, 94. The Dominion battleships scattered. The human fleet did not chase. They held the ring and they held the towers and they poured fire into anything that dared to climb back down. 10 seconds, Cyril whispered in the dark. 9, 8. Ryan put both palms against the hot side of the relay box. He thought of Elder Brock's tea stall and the way the old man would flick water at the kettle and listen for the hiss to tell him when it was almost ready. Not quite. He thought of the boy's sailpin burning cool against his chest pocket. He thought of the stupid, stubborn way humans and Elari and Zephyr all kept planting gardens in places that didn't want them and making those places home anyway. 3, Syrah said. 2, 1. The black spine's light went out. For a long heartbeat, there was only the sound of water and stone and the hard knock of Ryan's heart trying to leave his chest. Then the cavern's ceiling cracked from end to end. A jag of light stabbed down from above, bright as a new star, hot as a furnace door. The rock screamed. Air turned to knives. Ryan looked up and saw a second pillar, thinner, hidden behind stone, its threads already bright. Syrah's eyes widened. The translator Cuff did not need to tell him the meaning of her word. Another's. The spike they'd bled had been a decoy. The real strike was already charging, and its countdown read 30 seconds. The cavern shook like the world itself was breathing too fast. Dust rained down in gray curtains. The first black spine stood silent and dead, its threads extinguished, but beside it the second one, thinner, sharper, hidden within the rock, burned bright as a forge. Its lattice glowed white, humming with power that pressed against the chest like an invisible hand. Cracks spidered outward across the cavern walls as if the planet itself were flinching. Ryan Cade felt his stomach fall into his boots. His breath came in shallow pulls as if air had thinned. 30 seconds, maybe less. Syrah of the Elari stared at the new spike, her silver eyes reflecting its glare. She whispered a word the Cuff did not translate. It was older than machines, older than cities, a word of grief. They hid it, she said finally, her voice trembling. They always meant for us to see the first and waste our hope. This one is meant to break the mantle. How much time? Ryan asked, his voice raw. Syrah glanced at the Dominion slate, her fingers sliding across alien glyphs. 26 seconds. Ryan shoved his hands into the relay box again. The wires burned his palms. Then we steal them. The race against time. Above the caverns, the towers groaned. Wind spun their blades. Energy surged through trembling conduits. But this spike was not drinking from them. It had its own reserve, hidden deep, buried before the colony was ever planted. A Dominion seed waiting to grow. We can't bleed it, Ryan muttered. Not like the first, its cage is internal. Then break the cage, Syrah said. It'll detonate. She met his eyes, unblinking. It will detonate anyway, better by your hands than theirs. He looked at her, this alien who had shared tea stalls and music, who had walked into smoke without hesitation. Her sails quivered in the hot wind. The chimes of her cloak rang like a dirge. All right, Ryan said, his throat dry. But I need a surge, something to overload it clean, not dirty. The cuff buzzed faintly against his wrist. Above them, comms flickered alive. A voice cut through the static, deep, steady, like steel wrapped in patience. This is Admiral Elias Vance. Ryan Cade, we are monitoring your feed. Say what you need. Ryan nearly sagged in relief. I need a directed surge, something like hell, like a lightning bolt straight into its teeth. My river bleed won't hold this one. There was silence, then Monroe's voice, crisp and urgent. Admiral, our carriers have coil lances. We can retask one for a ground strike, focus energy through the tower grid. Risk, catastrophic backwash into civilian areas. Risk is already catastrophic, Vance said. Do it. Static crackled, then Monroe again. Ground team, you'll need to sync the spikes, timing with our lance. We fire in. She checked something unseen. 18 seconds. Syrah bent over the slate. Her fingers danced. Dominion glyphs warped and twisted, becoming something else. I can open it, she murmured. I can convince it to swallow what comes. Ryan yanked 2 cables out of the relay and jammed them into a pump housing. The whole cavern vibrated. Tell me when. The lance. In orbit, the carrier Resolute Dawn angled nose down. Its hull panels retracted, revealing a massive coil lance normally used for cutting battleships apart. Engineers rerouted safeties in seconds that should have taken minutes. Target lock, a tech called. Stabilize grid link, Monroe ordered. On Indomitable's bridge, Vance stood motionless, hands behind his back, eyes fixed on the tactical sphere. All ships guard Resolute Dawn. Nothing touches her until that lance fires. ARX ships lunged. Human corvettes flared their engines and dove into the swarm, missiles painting streaks of fire across the void. Starfighters screamed out of the carrier bays, hurling themselves into enemy formations with reckless precision. Space became a storm of steel and plasma. Resolute Dawn's coil lance began to glow. 10 seconds. In the cavern, the spike shrieked like a living thing. Its glow filled the air until every shadow was gone. Ryan's teeth rattled. He pressed the spanner against the cable junction and felt the vibration thrum through bone. 5 seconds, Sierra whispered. Her silver eyes never left the slate. 4, 3. Above, the lance fired. A bolt of condensed lightning screamed from orbit, tunneled through the tower grid, and plunged into the cavern like a god's spear. It struck the spike dead center. The spike convulsed. Its threads exploded in light, flaring white, then red, then black. The cavern shook as if the world was coughing up its lungs. Ryan was hurled backward, his head cracked against stone. He saw sparks and darkness at the same time. Sierra caught his arm before he slid into the chasm edge. Her grip was impossibly strong for someone so slight. She hauled him back, her sails flaring like torn banners. The spike screamed, its light folded inward, its cage snapped like glass under pressure. And then it collapsed into itself, vanishing in a flash of heat and ash. The cavern fell silent. The cost. Ryan lay on his back, staring at the stone ceiling. His chest heaved. His hands stank of burnt copper. His ears rang so loudly he could not hear his own heartbeat. "It's gone," Sierra said softly, almost in disbelief. "The spine is gone." Ryan laughed once, dry and hoarse. That was too close." Her eyes flicked upward. "No, not too close, not close enough." Ryan frowned. Then he heard it distant, muffled, like thunder through miles of stone. A third pulse. Another spike. The Dominion hadn't buried just two. They had buried an entire network. Above, Indomitable's sensors screamed alarms. Dozens of new heat signatures flared beneath the colony's surface, one after another, like stars being born in the ground. Monroe's voice broke across the comm. "Admiral, multiple spines detected across every major city. They're priming a chain reaction." Vance's jaw clenched. He had seen wars where planets were glassed, where fleets reduced worlds to rubble. But this was worse. This was methodical extermination. He spoke one word, quiet and final. "Extermination protocol." The officers froze. The room went silent. The order was not doctrine. It was not written in any manual. But every Terran officer knew what it meant. Total counterstrike, no restraint, no quarter. Humanity would answer in kind. "Signal the fleet," Vance said. His voice was calm but cold as iron. "If they mean to bury VIV, then we burn the sky above it." Monroe hesitated. "Admiral, that will." "Do it," Vance snapped. His hand closed into a fist. "Earth's armada answers with fire." The comms officer's hands shook as he relayed the command. Across 500 warships, safeties disengaged, magazines opened, and launch bays armed. The Dominion had lit the fuse. Now humanity would light the world. The order spread like wildfire. 500 human warships shifted in perfect unison. Launch bays yawned open like the jaws of predators. Silos released locks. Capacitors hummed with barely contained fury. Across the fleet, captains whispered the words with reverence and fear. Extermination protocol. It was a doctrine so secret it had lived only in rumors, spoken of in mess halls and old war colleges. A counterstrike designed not to conquer, not to cripple, but to annihilate. If triggered, every weapon would fire without restraint. Every ship would commit to a storm of fire until the enemy could no longer crawl, breathe, or remember what victory looked like. The Dominion had buried death under VIV. Humanity answered from the sky. The opening salvo. On the bridge of the dreadnought Indomitable, Admiral Elias Vance stood like a statue, his hands clasped behind his back. His gray eyes tracked the tactical hollow as Dominion icons flared alive across the map. "Signal all units," he said, calm as a winter night. "Execute." The void lit up. Missiles screamed out of their silos in salvos of hundreds. vapor trails glowing like burning spiderwebs. Rail cannons spat building-sized slugs that ripped through the dark faster than sound could ever dream. Plasma lances cut clean blue lines, carving across space and peeling armor from Dominion warships. The Dominion reeled, their formation shattered under the weight of fire. War barges that had survived a dozen campaigns were torn open in minutes. Smaller escorts evaporated in clouds of plasma. For the first time since the ARX Dominion began its conquests, they were not the storm. They were the prey. Ground beneath fire. In Marish Vale, the sky became a living canvas of light. Fire streaked across the heavens. Explosions rippled like new constellations. For those huddled in quarries and shelters, hope returned not as a whisper but as a roar. Ryan Cade crouched beside the burnt remains of the Black Spine's cage. His hands trembled. His throat was raw from smoke. The second spike was gone, but more still waited. "They're everywhere," he muttered, his voice cracked. "Every damn city we can't." "Yes," Sierra interrupted. She touched his wrist gently, grounding him. "But we stop what we can, that is what it means to resist." Her silver eyes caught the light from the sky, making her look like a figure carved from fire and water both. Ryan found strength in her steadiness. He rose, grabbing his dented tool case. "Then we keep moving." Above them, a Dominion troop transport streaked downward, trailing fire. It slammed into the far side of the river plaza, vomiting black-armored soldiers into the streets. The humans had unleashed the armada, but the Dominion were not broken yet. The Dominion fights back. On their flagship, the Eclipse of Dominion, Warlord Zerath von snarled as another of his cruisers detonated in a burst of plasma. His clawed hands dug into the railing, carving grooves into the alloy. "They burn us like cattle," an officer cried. "Then let them choke on the smoke," Von roared. His voice was guttural, his fangs bared. "Redirect reserves, all vessels, target their carriers, cut their wings, tear out their heart." Dominion vessels shifted, battered but not beaten. Their fire concentrated on the human carriers. Massive plasma volleys surged outward. 2 carriers were shredded instantly, their bays erupting in gouts of flame. Hundreds of fighters died with them, consumed before they could launch. On Indomitable's bridge, Monroe flinched as icons blinked out. "We've lost Horizon's reach and valorous star. Casualties." "Record them later," Vance said. "Redirect corvettes shield the dawn." Even as he spoke, he knew the cost. The Dominion were aiming to thin the human swarm, to break their ability to cover the planet below. And if even one more Black Spine reached detonation, Veen IV would still die. The ground war. Ryan and Sierra raced through shattered alleys, the hopper limping behind them with its fans coughing. Dominion soldiers marched in disciplined lines, their rifles cutting arcs of heat across the stone. But humanity's ground forces had already landed. Drop pods slammed into the streets like meteors. Exoclad troopers poured out, their movements precise and terrible. They fought with the ferocity of a species that had never forgotten how to claw survival from the dirt. A Terra Corps sergeant waved Ryan toward the caverns. "You the engineer?" "Yeah." "Command says you've got the codes." Ryan blinked. "Codes? I've got burnt fingers and a box of spanners." The sergeant shoved a data chip into his hand. "Council intel, Dominion relay maps. Your admiral says you'll know what to do." Ryan stared at the chip, then at Sierra. She nodded once. "The map will show where the next spines are hidden. If we cut their links, they cannot chain together." He closed his fist around it. "Then we run." Fire without joy. In orbit, the slaughter reached its height. Dominion warships broke apart in silence, their wreckage tumbling in fire. Human ships pushed with merciless rhythm, their gunners calling ranges like priests reciting psalms. And yet Admiral Vance did not smile. His face was stone, his voice quiet. "There is no joy in this," he said softly, though no one had asked. "Only duty." Monroe looked at him sidelong. She had fought beside him for years, had seen him grim, had seen him resolute. But tonight she saw something colder, something carved deeper. "Sir," she said quietly, "the Dominion flagship is moving to retreat." Vance's eyes narrowed. "No, not retreat." As if on cue, the Eclipse of Dominion turned, not away but down. Its nose angled toward Veen IV, its engines screamed. "They mean to ram," Monroe realized. "They'll drive their flagship straight into the crust." The hollow sphere lit with red. Time to impact, 5 minutes. Vance's voice was calm, but his fists clenched behind his back. Signal the fleet. No Dominion ship reaches that planet alive. Burn them out of the sky. The order carried, the storm of fire redoubled. On the edge, in the caverns of Marish Vale, Ryan pressed the chip into the relay reader. A map unfolded in light, showing black spines like tumors beneath every city. He felt his chest hollow out. "There are too many," he whispered. "Not too many," Sira corrected. Her eyes burned with quiet fire. "Only enough to test if your people will fight for more than their own." Before Ryan could answer, the cavern walls shook. A sound like thunder roared through stone. The ground split, throwing both of them to their knees. Above, the eclipse of Dominion plunged downward, dragging the entire battle with it. And on Indomitable's bridge, Admiral Vance gave the order that would decide the fate of billions. "All batteries, concentrate fire. Break the flagship or Earth's armada dies with this world." The void lit white. The eclipse of Dominion was a monster. Kilometers of black alloy armor. Its hull bristled with plasma batteries and gravity lances that had gutted empires. Once it had been the terror of 3 sectors, its shadow enough to silence uprisings. Now it burned with fresh wounds gouged by Terran weapons, but it still moved. And now it was falling. The Warlord's flagship angled nose first toward Veen IV, its engines screaming with desperate thrust. If it struck the planet, it would split the crust and ignite the Dominion's hidden spines. No world could survive that. On the bridge of the Indomitable, Admiral Elias Vance stood at the center dais, gray eyes fixed on the tactical sphere. "All batteries focus fire on the eclipse." His voice was iron. "Do not let it reach the atmosphere." "Target locked," Monroe said, her hands steady on the console though her chest ached with the weight of what was coming. "Range closing fast." "Then we close faster." The Indomitable swung to meet its enemy. The void between them became a corridor of fire. Firestorm in orbit. Rail cannons thundered. Missiles streaked out in swarms that split and split again, their warheads hammering at the eclipse's failing shields. Plasma lances painted the darkness blue-white, cutting at armor that glowed red with heat. The eclipse answered. Its forward batteries spat beams so wide they looked like walls of sunlight. An entire human cruiser vanished in a single shot, split into 2 burning halves that spiraled apart. Swarms of Dominion interceptors knifed through the crossfire, harassing the Terran corvettes that tried to flank. "Shields at 60%, Monroe called. "Portside plating failing on decks 5 through 9. "Hold them," Vance said calmly. "All ships tighten the ring, force them into our jaws." Around the flagship, Terran vessels obeyed. Cruisers and destroyers boxed the eclipse in, hurling fire from every angle. Corvettes swarmed like wasps, darting close to rake at engines and gun batteries. But the eclipse did not slow. The bridge of the eclipse. Warlord Zerath Von bared his fangs as the Indomitable filled his view screen. His black eyes burned with hate. "They bleed us," one of his officers snarled, "but they cannot kill us before we strike." Von's claws dug deeper into the railing. "Then we make our death a victory. If we fall on their colony. Let them inherit ash." He leaned forward, voice like a growl of thunder. "Target the Terran flagship, break it, and the armada scatters." Weapons locked, plasma capacitors overloaded. The eclipse turned its full fury on the Indomitable. Duel of Giants. The 2 dreadnoughts closed like dueling predators, trading fire at ranges where every shot struck home. The Indomitable's rail slugs slammed into the eclipse's prow, denting armor, shearing off gun batteries. The eclipse's gravity lances tore chunks out of the Indomitable's flanks, twisting steel like wet cloth. The void was lit brighter than any sun. On the bridge, Monroe's console screamed warnings. "Starboard shield collapsed, secondary reactor fluctuating." "Reroute through ventral capacitors," Vance said without hesitation. "Keep the main guns hot." "They're aiming straight for us." "Good," Vance said. His eyes never left the hollow. "That makes them easier to kill." Groundside, racing time. In the caverns of Marish Vale, the stone trembled like a drum. Dust fell in choking waves. Ryan Cade wiped sweat from his eyes and stared at the relay map, the glowing lines that traced Dominion spines across the world. "They're trying to trigger them all," he said, his voice hoarse. One by one or all at once if that ship hits. Sierra pressed a hand to the wall, feeling the vibrations ripple through stone. Her silver eyes narrowed. The indomitable fights above us, but even giants can bleed. Ryan clenched his tool case tighter. Then we give them one less thing to bleed for. He jammed the chip back into the relay. New coordinates flared, another cluster of spines hidden beneath the northern mountains. If they could sever the link here, the chain might collapse. We need transport, he muttered. Sierra's sails flared slightly. She pointed upward toward the sky where fire streaked. Then we take wings. A drop pod screamed overhead, trailing smoke, and slammed into the plaza. Its hatch blew open, and a half-dozen exoclad troopers spilled out, weapons ready. One turned and saw them. "You Cade," the soldier barked. Ryan blinked. "Yeah." "Command says you're coming with us. Strap in." Ryan stared. "You're joking." The soldier didn't joke. He grabbed Ryan by the collar and shoved him into the pod. Sierra followed without hesitation, sliding into the harness like she'd been born to it. The pod slammed shut. Thrusters ignited. The pod launched back toward the sky. The last push. The Indomitable shuddered under another direct hit. Consoles sparked. Crew staggered, still the ship held. "Eclipse shields failing," Monroe reported, her voice hoarse but steady. "Hull breaches along their spine, they can't take much more." "Neither can we," an engineer muttered. Vance heard him, he didn't argue. He looked at the tactical sphere, at the planet below, at the flagship before him. He thought of the voices from Veen IV's call, the woman's cracked plea, the children hidden in quarries, the boy with the tin sail pin. "There's no retreat," he said softly, almost to himself. Then louder, "Forward batteries, prepare for overdrive, ram trajectory 30 degrees starboard, we'll end this nose to nose." Monroe's head snapped toward him. "Admiral, you'll tear us apart." "So will they," Vance said. "Better we choose where we break." The Indomitable roared forward, engines burning brighter than suns. The Eclipse surged to meet it, its prow glowing red from atmospheric drag. In the void above Veen IV, two Titans charged, every gun screaming, every crew braced for death. The moment. On the ground, Ryan looked out the pod's viewport as they broke through the smoke. He saw the two ships collide in a storm of light. Fire streaked across the heavens like falling stars. The sky itself seemed to split. Sierra's hand found his, her grip firm. "This is the moment," she whispered. The pod shook violently. The harness dug into his shoulders. Above them, the Indomitable and the Eclipse slammed together in a clash that would decide not just a battle, but the survival of a world. The collision shook the heavens. The Indomitable and the Eclipse of Dominion slammed prow to prow in a storm of plasma and steel. Rail slugs carved glowing furrows across armor. Plasma lances burned through decks, venting fire and bodies into the void. Missiles detonated in clusters, leaving blossoms of white flame in the black. For a heartbeat, the two Titans hung locked, nose against nose, as if the galaxy itself held its breath. Then the duel consumed them both. Indomitable's last stand. On Indomitable's bridge, sparks fell like rain. Consoles screamed warnings. Hull integrity dropped in chunks. Yet the crew held their posts, their voices firm through the chaos. Main batteries firing. Secondary reactor collapsing. Port hangar destroyed, fighters lost. Monroe staggered as her console blew out in a flash of light. She wiped blood from her cheek and shouted over the roar. "Admiral, we can't hold the next volley." "We don't need to hold," Vance said, voice calm, eyes fixed on the tactical sphere. "We need to finish." He looked at the looming shape of the Eclipse filling the viewport, its hull cracked and burning but still alive, still pushing. He knew what had to be done. "Overload the reactor," he ordered. The crew froze. Monroe turned sharply, eyes wide. "Sir." "You heard me. Prepare the self-destruct." "Admiral, if we detonate." "We take them with us." Vance's voice never rose, but the weight of it pressed like gravity. "We end the Dominion flagship here and now, no matter the cost." Silence fell, then one by one voices answered. "Aye, sir." The enemy within. On the Eclipse's bridge, Warlord Zareth Von roared with savage triumph. "Their flagship breaks, one more strike and they burn." His officers obeyed, even as fires licked the consoles, even as atmosphere vented in hungry streams. The Eclipse was dying, but he would not relent. He would kill the human dreadnought and bury the colony beneath its fall. Yet even as he exulted, a warning klaxon shrieked, a frequency his people had not heard in centuries. Energy spike, reactor overdrive. The Indomitable was preparing to die. Vaughn snarled, his claws dug grooves into the steel railing. Madness, they would kill themselves to kill us. His second officer bared sharp teeth. That is what they are, warlord, that is humanity. Groundside the race. Ryan's drop pod slammed into the northern mountains, burying itself in snow and stone. The hatch blew open. Cold air rushed in, carrying the scent of ice and dust. He stumbled out, coughing, clutching his dented tool case. Sierra followed, her cloak chimes ringing softly against the stillness. Around them, TerraCorps troopers spread into defensive lines, their exoframes steaming in the frost. Before them, the mountain opened like a wound. Inside, black light pulsed. Another spine, taller than the last two, pierced the rock, its threads glowing hungrily. There, Sierra said, pointing, her silver eyes narrowed. That one is the heart. If it fires, it will trigger the rest. How much time? Ryan asked. Minutes, she whispered. Ryan's chest tightened. He dropped to his knees at the relay box, pulling wires with shaking hands. Then we bleed it, again, just like before. No, Sierra said, her voice low. This one is different. It has no bleed path, no failsafe. It is meant to die with the world. Ryan's breath came fast, fogging in the cold. He thought of the boy's tin sailpin in his pocket. He thought of Elder Brock's T-Stall, gone in fire. He thought of Admiral Vance, somewhere above, holding back a monster with his life. Then we cheat it, he said hoarsely. We give it a path, even if it kills us doing it. Sierra touched his wrist, her gaze steady. I will help you lie to it. The choice. On Indomitable's bridge, alarms wailed as the countdown began. 30 seconds to reactor overload. Monroe's voice shook. Admiral, there must be another way. There isn't, Vance said simply. He turned to her. For the first time in years, his stern face softened. You're a fine officer, Lee, better than I ever was. You'll take the fleet home. Her eyes widened. Sir, you're staying. The crew will evacuate, but someone has to hold the core steady until detonation. If it destabilizes early, we won't take them with us. Monroe's throat closed. You'll die. Vance gave the faintest smile. We all die. The trick is making it matter. He turned back to the viewport, to the burning hulk of the Eclipse pressing closer. His voice was steady as stone. Signal the fleet. Break clear. Protect the colony. Indomitable will finish the fight. The order went out. One by one, Terran ships veered away, leaving their flagship to face its enemy alone. Groundside, the impossible fix. In the mountain cavern, Ryan ripped cables apart, his hands bleeding from sharp edges. Sparks burned his skin. Reroute through the pump lines, he muttered. Phase the intake, flip the load. Sierra's hands blurred across the Dominion slate, her voice flowing in liquid syllables as she fed the spike new lies. You are finished, she told it. You are already victorious. Rest now, rest. The spine pulsed angrily, fighting the command. The ground shook, stone cracked. Not enough, Ryan shouted. It needs more bleed, more grounding. He looked up, eyes wild. We need a charge, something to punch through. The sergeant who had pulled him into the pod stepped forward, a grenade in his hand. Plasma core, he said simply. You put it where it hurts, we buy you the seconds. Ryan stared at the glowing charge. If he planted it wrong, the spine would detonate instantly. If he planted it right, it might open the path. His hands trembled. Sierra's fingers touched his, steadying them. You are not alone, she whispered. He swallowed, nodded. Let's end this. On Indomitable, the countdown ticked. 10 seconds. Crew pods launched, streaking into the void like tiny sparks. The bridge was empty save for Vance and Monroe. She had refused to leave. I won't abandon you, she said, voice trembling. You'll stay, Vance said softly, and you'll see it through. The deck shook as another lance from the Eclipse ripped across their hull. Fire washed the bridge. Vance gripped the rail, his eyes locked on the burning enemy ship. 5 seconds. He exhaled once, slow and steady. For Earth, for Veen IV, for humanity. Cliffhanger. In the cavern, Ryan slammed the plasma core into the spine's cage. The world turned white. On Indomitable's bridge, the reactor reached zero. The void erupted in fire. The explosion lit the heavens. From the surface of VNIV, survivors saw the night sky split open, brighter than dawn, brighter than any sun. The Indomitable and the Eclipse of Dominion vanished together in a storm of light. Fire rippled through the void, scattering wreckage across orbit. Pieces of both titans fell like meteors, their trails glowing red as they burned. The sound followed seconds later, an echo through the air like a giant's drum. It rolled across valleys, over mountains, into caverns where frightened people huddled. For one breathless moment, silence followed. And then came the cheer. From shelters, from shattered streets, from river quarries and broken towers, the colonists of VNIV cried out. Their voices rose, raw and triumphant. They had seen the worst the galaxy could bring, and they had survived. But survival came at a cost. Ryan Cade opened his eyes to darkness and heat. His chest heaved. Every inch of his skin burned with pain. The spine was gone. Where it had stood, there was now only a blackened crater, the stone walls melted smooth. His spanner lay twisted beside him, its handle fused by heat. Sparks still crackled in the air like tiny stars. Sierra knelt beside him, her sails trembling, her silver eyes wet. Her hands pressed against his chest, steadying his ragged breath. "You live," she whispered, "barely." Ryan coughed, the taste of copper in his mouth. He forced a grin. "Guess I got lucky." "No," she said firmly, "not luck, choice." He wanted to answer, but his strength was gone. His head sagged. Her arms caught him, light but unbreakable. Around them, TerraCorps troopers moved through the cavern, dragging out Dominion corpses, securing the last remnants of enemy tech. One paused to look at Ryan and gave a sharp nod, the kind of nod soldiers gave to men who had stood when no one else could. In orbit, the Terran Armada reformed. Where once there had been 500 ships, now fewer than 300 remained. The rest were gone, shattered, burning, scattered wreckage falling into atmosphere like silent rain. And at the heart of the loss was the Indomitable, its name etched into every surviving crew's chest. On the bridge of the carrier Resolute Dawn, Captain Lee Monroe stood with her shoulders squared, her face pale but hard. She had escaped only because Vance had forced her into the evacuation pod at the last second. Now she bore the weight of command. "Transmit to all ships," she ordered. Her voice cracked, but she did not falter. "The Dominion flagship is destroyed. Admiral Vance is gone. The fleet is under my command now." The comm channels filled with silence, then with quiet affirmations. Not cheers, not victory songs, just grim acknowledgments, the voices of men and women who understood what had been given and what could never be returned. The message. Hours later, as VNIV's fire still smoldered, Monroe stood before the comm recorder. Her uniform was torn and stained, a bandage wrapped around her brow, but her posture was unyielding. "This is Captain Lee Monroe of the United Terran Fleet," she began. "To the colonists of VNIV, you are free. The Dominion came to erase you, but you endured. They came to silence you, but your voices will carry. Humanity does not abandon its own." She paused, her throat tight. "And to the galaxy that watched and did nothing, hear us. You believed us weak. You believed we would turn our backs as you did. You were wrong. We will fight for our people, for our homes, for our right to stand beneath the stars. Remember this day. Remember the fire. For Earth's Armada will answer again if ever called." Her hand trembled as she shut off the recorder. Alone, she whispered the last words not meant for broadcast. "And I'll remember you, Ilias, always." Far across the stars, in the dark halls of the Dominion homeworld, the surviving warlords watched the footage in silence. The eclipse of Dominion, pride of their fleets, gone. Their armies shattered by the upstarts they had mocked. Warlord councils growled, their voices filled with anger and disbelief. "They should not have been capable of this," one snarled. "They were fractured," another spat. "They were prey." At last, the High Primarch rose from his throne, his 6 golden eyes burning. "They are no longer prey," he said. His voice was a rumble like distant thunder. "They are predators, and predators must be hunted." But deep in his gaze, there was something else, something none of his warlords dared name. Fear. Weeks passed. VNIV rebuilt slowly. Cities smoldered, but life stirred again. Children laughed in streets where wreckage still smoldered. Farmers replanted fields scarred by bombardment. Survivors sang songs of both grief and defiance. Ryan Cade walked the valley streets with a limp, his arm in a sling, the boy's tin sailpin pinned to his torn jacket. People nodded to him as he passed, not with pity but with respect. He was no soldier. He had never asked to be a hero. But when the world needed hands steady enough to turn wires and flip switches, his had not failed. Sierra walked beside him, her sails catching the breeze, her cloak chimes ringing softly. Where once there had been only wary glances between human and Elari, now there were greetings, small smiles, a shared fire. "The stars are changing," she said softly, watching the sky where human warships still patrolled. "They always do," Ryan answered. She looked at him, silver eyes steady. "No, this time they change because of you." He shook his head. "Not me, them, us, all of us." For a long moment neither spoke. The glassgrass sang faintly in the wind, its voice soft, almost like a promise. Epilogue: the fire yet burns. In the halls of the Galactic Council, delegates argued and shouted. Some called for sanction, some for alliance, some for war. But none could ignore the truth anymore. Humanity had shown its hand. They had answered the call of their own with fire. They had stood where the Council had faltered. They had broken the Dominion in open battle. And though they had lost their greatest ship and their greatest admiral, they had won something more dangerous. They had one belief. Among the colonies, among the oppressed, among the countless worlds that had once whispered prayers for deliverance, a new word spread. Hope, and with it came a new truth, one the galaxy would never again forget. When humanity answers, they do not whisper, they come with fire,